Everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our convocation ceremony. I'm George Bridges. I am not the president of Evergreen, but I will be on October 1st. And there's nothing in your program, the notes on convocation to suggest that I would be speaking now. I am breaking the rules. That's an Evergreen principle, right? Yeah. My part of the program comes a little later, but please consider this as a brief and short warm-up act for Professor Scarry. I assure you that she is brighter, funnier, and much more dynamic than I. Nevertheless, I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to be the next president of Evergreen, and thrilled that you are here today to celebrate the opening of the academic year. For right now, I want to make an announcement. While I have your full attention and before we begin this morning's program. It is an announcement which I think is important, and the program that we'll have today is fun and intellectually engaging. The announcement is this. Please listen. Even with the important gains achieved by the nation's civil rights movement over many years, our country continues to struggle profoundly with issues of race and racism, social and economic inequality, and repeated and glaring instances of injustice. At this moment in our history, we have a rare and a critical opportunity to address these issues, to make constructive changes in our country, in our community, and on our campus. And in the days, weeks, and months ahead, we will have community conversations about power and privilege in our society and on our campus. And I assure you some of these conversations will prove difficult. The issues and solutions certainly are complex. But through it all, each of us will meet fascinating people. We will learn much about our differences and learn even more about ourselves. I want you to know that this important work begins today. It begins now. Students, starting this afternoon, you will attend a set of required orientation sessions. Go to them. As you know, there are a few requirements at Evergreen. Attending these sessions is one of them. The sessions are important to your success at Evergreen, and they are equally important to Evergreen's success as a college. I especially want to highlight the session entitled Don't Panic. It is a session on learning in a diverse community. We want you to embrace the session with an open heart and an open mind, and be ready to listen to the panelists carefully, thoughtfully, and your fellow students. Finally, I want you to know that Evergreen community, of which you are now a part, accords high priority to cultivating and sustaining a climate of respect for and the affirmation of others. We're also a community that values and seeks to ensure that each one of us, each one of us is safe. Indeed, we affirm each student's and each community's members' right to learn, to develop, and to prosper here in a safe, intellectually centered, and socially constructive environment. Together, all of us, together, we have an opportunity to create positive and lasting changes in our lives and the lives of others. We must seize this opportunity. We must. And each of us, me included, has much to learn and do. So let's get to it. With that, I'm going to get off the stage and let the program and band begin. Thank you.
One more time, please join me in thanking the Artesian Rumble Orchestra for their performance this morning, and do it loud enough so they can hear us out there. I too am not the president of Evergreen. And I'm not George Bridges either. I'm Michael Zimmerman, and I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs. In case you have any trouble differentiating between George and me, just remember that I'm the one who will never be wearing a bow tie. Seriously, what a wonderful way to begin a new academic year. Students, we've been waiting for you. Welcome. Faculty and staff, welcome back. In addition to being the start of our academic year, today is International Day of Peace, as designated by the United Nations. Given some of the topics we'll be discussing today, and throughout the rest of this year and the rest of your career here, this is a very fitting coincidence and something worthy of celebrating. One of the very best things about a convocation is the opportunity it provides for so many different people filling such a range of roles on campus, to come together to celebrate the start of another academic year. We are a richer place when we are able to participate in shared experiences like we are doing today. We are a richer place because of the efforts of many, and while it is impossible to acknowledge all of you, I would like to individually thank members of our Board of Trustees for their service on behalf of the college. Now pay attention, I said individually. Please join me in thanking first our board chair, Fred Goldberg from Olympia. Irene Gonzalez from Spokane. Keith Kessler from Hoquiam. And Ann Prophet from Whidbey Island. We are a community. We work together, we play together, we celebrate together, and occasionally we grieve together. What keeps us together, the bond that ties us to one another, is our shared belief that education is a powerful tool for social transformation. This transformation can occur both at the individual level as we grow and learn, and within our communities as we reach out and attempt to make the world a better place for those with whom we live and work. And make no mistake about it, our communities need us. We are living in a time of racial upheaval, of environmental degradation, and of great economic disparity. But we have the option of shaping our future, of making the world a better place, a more open and respectful place, a fairer place, and a greener place. Such change isn't going to come easily, and it will require hard work, creativity, and knowledge. Contemplating work of this sort is especially fitting at the beginning of this particular orientation week, since the week's theme is thinking together, acting together. Both thinking and acting are critically important. Either alone isn't enough. Together, they're much more powerful. In this context, and given the problems we face collectively, I'm both proud and lucky, and I hope you feel similarly, to be associated with an institution that cares deeply about social justice and sustainability. We are a community, but we are a very special type of community. We have a shared belief that education is a powerful tool for social transformation, and central to this belief and to our shared work and vision here at Evergreen is the perspective that every voice is of consequence. Your education, and your experiences have shaped a unique perspective. And sharing that perspective, sharing your insights, is incredibly important. It enriches our collective exploration and examination of the critical issues of our time. Yes, every voice is of consequence, but how each of those voices is presented is absolutely critical. Are your opinions well supported by data? Are they well informed by a close textual analysis? Do they arise from reasoned discourse? Or are they simply a reshaping of things others have said? Are they shared respectfully and open to alteration? Or are they rigidly asserted, brooking no modification? In your daily life here at Evergreen and beyond, let your voice be heard, share your opinions, but be certain that you can support those opinions. Continually challenge yourself to understand why you believe what you believe. This is what meaningful education and meaningful discourse is all about. Do this, and you'll have the power to transform yourself and those around you. But it's not just about you. In a community, especially in a community where every voice is of consequence, it's every bit as much about us as it is about you. That means that the ideas of your colleagues are just as important as are your ideas. And this means that each of us has a responsibility to develop an additional set of skills if we are to participate fully in a community of this sort. We have to learn to pay attention, to listen to one another, to really hear what others are saying, to closely consider the implications of what others are saying. We must be open to ideas that might seem alien to our own, that might contradict what we believe. Please, don't misunderstand me. We shouldn't feel an obligation to accept these ideas as our own. Rather, we should be open to them and to the possibility while feeling perfectly comfortable pushing back against them, pushing back with facts, with close reading of texts, and with reasoned, well-articulated arguments. Collectively, we need to develop the ability to talk with one another and not simply at one another. This basic premise is the core of Evergreen's pedagogy. This basic premise is, after all, what our seminar model is all about. Seminars and the learning that takes place within them are as rich as each of you makes it. Participate fully, share your ideas, listen carefully, and respectfully disagree. Let your voice and the voices of your colleagues be heard, and the educational experience will be rich, challenging, and worthwhile. Let me touch on one other critical facet of the Evergreen experience. Without majors and without grades, without any specific course requirements, Evergreen students have an enormous amount of freedom. But as is always the case, great freedom comes with great responsibility. You can abuse that freedom by denying your academic choices the care and consideration that they deserve. You can abuse that freedom by opting to avoid subjects that make you uncomfortable or about which you know nothing. If you do that, you'll not be taking advantage of the best Evergreen has to offer. Evergreen's faculty and staff trust you all to be adults, and that means that we trust you to make intentional academic choices. We trust you to explore uncomfortable ideas, and we trust you to find your individual passion. Of course, we'll help you do all of this. One of the most productive ways we can help you with this is via our newest graduation requirement. You'll be required to think about the academic choices you've made and those you still have to make. We will require you each year to write an essay about this thinking. This essay, your academic statement, will encourage you to reflect carefully on what you've accomplished and help you focus on where you want to go. The final version of this academic statement will become the first document in your final Evergreen transcript when you graduate, and thus you'll be able to present your Evergreen education to all in a manner that best explains the educational journey that you've been on. While you may not perceive it in this manner right now, the academic statement is truly a gift that the faculty have given each and every one of you. It's the gift of personal reflection, something that's done all too infrequently. But it's up to you, individually, it's up to you to use that gift wisely, to shape it as you see fit. As with everything at Evergreen, you are in control of it. Faculty will advise you about your statement, but they will not approve it. It is, after all, your academic statement. Yes, all of this is hard work. Crafting a personalized education for a lifetime is hard work, but it's hard work that can be amazingly rewarding. The academic statement is a way for you to tell your story to the world, a way for others to more fully understand you, and equally important, for you to understand yourself. But hard work need not be divorced from fun, and both that hard work and fun begins this morning with a presentation by the author of Thinking in an Emergency, and then with small group seminars with faculty and student colleagues. The work we're undertaking together, the difficult work and the fun work, the interdisciplinary work, and the in-depth focus on something specific is all designed to cultivate in each of you critical thinking and communication skills. Taken together, the liberal arts journey upon which you're embarking today will help you develop habits of thinking that will remain with you and serve you well your entire life. And as Elaine Scarry points out so very well in Thinking in an Emergency, developing these habits of thinking are as important for society collectively as they are for us individually. With these habits in place, when an emergency arises, we are prepared to act thoughtfully rather than rashly, to control our destiny rather than let others make decisions for us. As Elaine Scarry has argued, without these habits, we surrender our rights far too easily, while with them, we can build strong communities of the sort we treasure at Evergreen. Elaine Scarry is the Walter M. Cabot Professor of Aesthetics and the General Theory of Value at Harvard University. In addition to being the author of Thinking in an Emergency, she is the author of 7 books and the editor of another 3. Her most recent volume, Thermonuclear Monarchy: Choosing Between Democracy and Doom, was published last year to great acclaim, with a review in the New York Times describing it as eloquent, and one in the San Francisco Chronicle calling it urgent and lucid. Dr. Scarry earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Chatham College and a PhD from the University of Connecticut. Prior to moving to Harvard University, she taught at the University of Pennsylvania. She has been awarded 2 honorary doctorates and has been included in lists of the top 100 public intellectuals by both Prospect Magazine and Foreign Affairs. Dr. Scarry exemplifies the type of interdisciplinary approach we treasure at Evergreen. Although her specialty lies within the literature of the 19th century, she comfortably crosses disciplines and has written masterfully about philosophy, cultural studies, and politics, among many other fields. Whether she's writing about beauty, pain, nuclear war, or the importance of democracy, Elaine Scarry encourages her readers to join her on an intellectual journey of discovery. It's my absolutely great pleasure to invite Elaine to the stage to speak with all of us this morning. Please welcome her.
Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I've gotten to look at all of you across the space of a computer screen where I was able to greet you. When I came here last spring, I quickly learned that the faculty and students were able to tell me as much about my book as I was able to tell them, and I suspect that all of you who are starting here for the first time today will also be able to tell me a lot about my book, perhaps as much or more than I can tell you. But I've been asked to speak briefly about my book, and so I'll do that for the next few minutes. People in the United States have the capacity for virtuoso citizenship, but in present decades, that capacity has lapsed. Traditionally, it was something which we, along with other countries, were very good at. In the book, Thinking in an Emergency, I described the incredible mutual aid contracts on the plains of Canada's Saskatchewan region, where people, sometimes 100 of them, sometimes 25,000 of them, actually put their names on a piece of paper, a social contract, promising to help one another if an emergency arises, and often even specifying the particular tool they'll bring to a catastrophe in the event that it should arise. The book also describes mutual aid pacts in countries as different as Japan, Ethiopia, and Zimbabwe, pacts that enable people to survive sudden crop failures or to survive earthquakes. Does the United States have mutual aid? Does it have the kind of neighborhood groups that Japan had that allowed its civilian population to respond so effectively in the 1995 Kobe earthquake? I think the answer is no, and we can see that from the population's helplessness during the Katrina hurricane and other disasters. Most gravely, from my point of view, our population has come to believe that we have no say in repairing the country's unjust prison system and in our decisions about going to war, events where thousands of people will be injured. In the past, in the 19th century, I think we did have these abilities. Tocqueville, for example, in his account of 19th century America, just marvels at the number of voluntary associations in the United States. I think we have come to believe that the citizenry has nothing to contribute to our collective self-defense. This belief is deeply wrong. The citizenry can, in fact, become the country's best defense. One historical event that's very striking to me is that when the Columbia Space Shuttle burned up in 2003, NASA was able to recreate logistically the whole flight of the shuttle as it entered the Earth's atmosphere because all over the United States, amateur astronomers were watching the heavens that night and taking pictures. No one asked them to do that. They did that simply because they had habits of watching the sky. One NASA scientist called the sky watchers our heroes. There is no sensory system any government agency could invent that could ever accomplish what a sensitive citizenry can accomplish. On 9/11, it was the ordinary citizenry that was able to protect the country by bringing down Flight 93 in Pennsylvania, whereas all the costly military arrangements did not enable the Pentagon to prevent the Flight 77 from hitting the Pentagon. The Pentagon was not able to protect even the Pentagon, let alone the rest of the country. And there are many other examples that show that ordinary citizens have been crucial to American defense. For example, the shoe bomber in December of 2001 was stopped by ordinary citizens on the plane. The Christmas bomber on Northwest Airlines in 2009 was stopped by citizens on the plane. The vendor in Times Square in 2010 who noticed something was amiss and alerted the police, and it turned out to be a potential car bombing, again, helped to protect people. Most recently, just a few weeks ago, the 3 Americans on the train between Amsterdam and Paris that valiantly acted together to bring down a man preparing to shoot an AK-47 into the passenger's car by car. In most of the instances I've cited, the result did not just come out of the blue. The amateur astronomers who documented the shuttle from far out over the Pacific over to Texas, where the shuttle came down, were executing a daily practice, watching the skies. The stewardess on the first plane to go into the Twin Towers on 9/11 reported the seat number of the terrorists who had gotten up out of their seat. That small act by the stewardess is almost never talked about, but it was an amazing act. Since all the passengers on all 4 planes died, we could still be today debating who among those passengers was responsible for what happened. Instead, we knew almost immediately the actors. In radioing to the ground the seat numbers, that stewardess was following a simple protocol. The people on Flight 93, the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, gathered information, deliberated, decided on a plan, and voted. They actually voted, and then they brought down the plane before it could go into Washington and hurt many other civilians. One of them had a small copy of the Constitution in her pocket. Another, the person who initiated the final act of storming the cockpit, said, "Let's roll," a sentence that enabled family members to identify him, since apparently he said to his wife and children once a day, "Let's roll." Turning to events this year, the ability of citizens to use their cell phones to take pictures of police brutality against African Americans has inaugurated a new era of bearing witness. That too is something people can do because using that little tool, the cell phone, is a well-practiced habit. It may eventually work to revise and repair our criminal policing and our prison system that is deeply unjust. With all these good examples, do we need to worry? The answer, I think, is yes, because the sense of citizen disenfranchisement is everywhere writ large, in floods and earthquakes, and especially when the country plans to undertake wars or to launch drones. Members of Congress and the citizenry sit in armchairs for an announcement on TV, when it is the Congress and the citizenry that are constitutionally responsible for overseeing these acts, for testing the arguments for going to war, and for acting as a brake on the urge to injure foreign people. The era of nuclear weapons has undercut our capacity for self-defense, which is the right underlying all other rights. And simultaneously, it has undercut our capacity of mutual aid. Our country plans to spend $1 trillion in the next 30 years on new nuclear weapons. $1 trillion is $10,000 for every single household in America. Did you in your household have any say in deciding to dedicate $10,000 to more nuclear weapons? We've gone off duty in part because we've come to believe that emergency habits, customs, and laws are forms of non-thinking. And the work of the book, Thinking in Emergency, is precisely to remind us how much virtuoso thinking depends on well-exercised habits. Today, I will contemplate briefly the role of habit in 3 modes of thinking: sensation, creation, and deliberation, as I do much more fully in the book that you've read. In the book, I cite philosopher John Dewey. I'm talking now about the first mode of thinking, sensation. I cite the philosopher John Dewey on color perception. Dewey says it takes some years of active dealing with things for a little child to reliably discriminate green, blue, or red. From that, we can appreciate how many hours of practice are required to reach the adult state in which, according to recent neuroscience, the average human being is capable of distinguishing 26,000 colors, or over 2.3 million different colors if we include gray value or lightness. Now, I know that anyone residing at this college is likely to have a profound experience of one color in particular, and that seems true for 3 reasons. First, the beautiful name of your school. Second, the way that name acts as a call to address and repair the 2 largest threats to Earth, global warming and nuclear weapons. And third, the location of the school in a glade of Douglas fir, giant cedar, western hemlock, maples, red alder arching over our heads, and around our feet, or maybe I should say our knees and shoulders, sword ferns, licorice ferns, the holly fern, the male fern, the maidenhair fern, the lady fern, the giant chain fern, and mosses and lichens with their unpronounceable names: Odopodium, the Takakias, Peltagora. Because I know all this from having visited last May, I telephoned the neuroscientist who had introduced me to the research specifying the remarkable 26,000 color figure and asked him for the number of shades of green that adults typically see. How many shades of green? After a long, long silence, in which I pictured Bevel Conway on the other end of the phone busily calculating and computing, he delivered the answer in a single word: many. Come on, Bevel, I complained. If neuroscientists can blithely specify 26,000 for the full spectrum and 2.3 million if we include gray values, can we not just divide by 7, since there are 7 colors: yellow, green, blue, red, orange, indigo, violet, or 8 if we include purple? Can we not simply specify 3,250 shades of green and 275,000 shades of green if we include gray tones? That, he counseled me, will serve as a first approximation, but there are complications. One factor, he said, is cultural. Evergreen College is closer to Asia than we are on the East Coast, and in Asia, the boundary between green and blue is a bit less emphatic. Another factor is biological and evolutionary. The brain does not dedicate equal amounts of space to each of the 7 or 8 different colors. As a species, we have evolved the greatest sensitivity to green and hence the largest amount of space to green, so we can't do a simple division. As a result of this conversation, I have no idea how many shades of green there are, but I do grasp that the crucial role played by practice and habit in achieving sensory acuity suggests that 2 or 4 years from now, your own repertoire of this particular color will probably be higher than mine is, even though I'm a gardener and I pay a lot of attention, at least an hour a day, to our humble array of East Coast greens. One of your faculty, Julie Zay, told me that when she first came to Evergreen, she expected to see a dinosaur. I was puzzled, since she was telling me this while we were still in downtown Olympia. Dinosaurs, I asked? Oh, never mind, she said. You'll see. And indeed, when the next day I arrived on campus, we seemed to have entered some prehistoric corridor where the patience of Earth and under Earth over millennia were clearly in evidence, and it seemed anything might come out of the ferns. I turn now to creation, that is, to the place of habit in acts of thinking that we would all recognize as creation. So many of you play a musical instrument, write poetry, paint, or dance that I am confident that you are deeply acquainted with how embedded habit is in achieving high acts of artistry. I cite there in a footnote the popular formulation by Malcolm Gladwell that 10,000 hours of practice are required before the Beatles can become the Beatles, or before Bill Joy or Bill Gates can invent what they went on to invent in the realm of computers. Recently, both the Tate Modern in London and the Museum of Modern Art in New York dedicated a show to the artworks Henri Matisse had completed in the last 14 years of his life, when he was in his late 70s and early 80s. This is from 1940 to 1954. This followed a period when he had been severely ill and weakened, and so weakened that he was confined to a bed and to a wheelchair. Yet what emanated from this period were the exuberant, mobile, supple, large-scale color cutouts, like the series of blue nudes or blue algae or acanthus leaves that he completed sometimes on painted paper and sometimes as designs for stained glass or ceramics, as at the Dominican Chapel of the Rosary of Vence. Observers and art critics have noted that standing in the presence of these, it is as though Matisse found a way to take a piece of air and sculpt it, or take a piece of pure color, substanceless pure color, and sculpt it. Many art critics and museum goers judge these works to be equal to the greatest masterpieces in any phase of Matisse's life. Some even designate the chapel his crowning achievement. Now, even leaving aside his severe illness, how is it that he brought an entire new genre of work into being? The physician Atal Gawande tells us that, quote, the amount of light reaching the retina of a healthy 60-year-old is 1/3 that of a 20-year-old. And that's just the beginning of what Gawande shows as the fall-off in sensory acuity as we age. And yet, countering this ebbing of powers are the habits which enable the increase of those very same sensory powers. Creation entails the counterfactual, working against fact, bringing into being something that wasn't there, and in this case, doing so with hands and eyes that ordinarily should be diminished in their power, but that have counterfactually achieved their highest period of power. The answer to this mystery you can easily anticipate. The magnificent catalog accompanying the Museum of Modern Art exhibit tells us over and over again that Matisse did this by practicing and practicing and practicing. He could, for example, record motion in the air because he would often gather himself and his nurse in a cab, or rather, I should say, his nurse would gather herself and him into a cab, and mutual aid plays an important part in the Matisse story. And they would go down to the seaside to sketch with a pencil large, quote, large movements of seagulls hovering and flying on the coast. He sketched these pictures and other pictures, quote, to the point where he could draw them blindfold. And then he drew them in the air on a large surface using, quote, a charcoal stick tied to the end of a bamboo pole. Now compare in your own minds the difference in precision in your own drawings when you hold the lead of a pencil or a pencil point just an inch or less than an inch away from your fingertips. And now imagine that the pencil were instead a foot long and your hand were separated from the tip of the pencil or pen by a foot. But Matisse was using an implement not a foot long, but many feet long, a charcoal stick tied to a bamboo pole. Like athletes, artists, scientists, engineers, he had to recreate himself in order to bring about these aerial displays. Another tool was scissors. The catalog provides many accounts of his drawing with scissors. The language describing his creative process brings together two vocabularies we sometimes wrongly keep stranded from one another. The extreme of habit, the word automaton is used, and the extreme of spontaneity. Matisse himself and others watching him in the act of creation described the outcome as though it were, quote, a splash or, quote, a spurt, words which ordinarily describe a process that is rapid, accidental, unpredictable as to its site of landing. Matisse conforms to our conventional understanding of what a creator is, what an artist is. In the book, I use Benjamin Franklin as an instance because he invented in many different areas: bifocals, street lamps, treatises, a university, swimming fins, himself. And I hope that you could see in reading how much I revere the technicolor genius of Ben Franklin. Of course, the object that the book, Thinking in Emergency, wishes would come into being is not street lamps or Bose speakers, as fabulous as those inventions are, but a basic framing equality of survival, the equality of survival that is so carefully built into the Swiss shelter system. As the book mentions, the aspiration for equality of survival is explicit in the Swiss shelter system, but it's certainly recognizable in each of the emergency protocols in the books. Perhaps as a shorthand way of holding on to this principle of equality of survival, you can think of the Chilean toast, in which people first put their glasses like this, and then like this, and then like this, and they say, above you, below you, equal to you. Justice always requires acts of creation. If one sets out to find beauty in the world, one finds it in both naturally occurring instances, the leaves on the trees right outside this building, and in humanly made instances, the description of leaves in a Sappho poem. But justice is always humanly made. It always requires a labor to bring it into being. Justice is hard to define, but perhaps we can agree, for today anyway, on two principles. First, that in a just society, people work to diminish injury rather than to inflict it. And second, in a just society, people work to ensure equality of survival. These two together require what your teacher Miranda Mellis calls virtuosity of citizenship. We're very far from both of those right now, but they carry us to the third realm of thinking, which is deliberation. I turn now to this third mode, deliberation. Emergency procedures are laden with deliberation. CPR, the Swiss shelter system, the mutual aid associations of Zimbabwe and Ethiopia, the rotating credit associations of Ghana and Nigeria, the constitutional provisions for overseeing war, not only in the United States, but in France, Russia, and India, all came about through difficult and time-consuming acts of deliberation. Sometimes, in addition to being created by deliberation, the very content of the protocol is deliberation. This is explicit in the constitutional provision requiring legislative debate before going to war. But it's the implicit content of the other emergency procedures as well, since they aim to bring an action to allow an action to be carried out so efficiently that there's mental space left over for solving additional unforeseen problems. Assemblies tend to play a very big part in the account of deliberation. Perhaps you will recall the book's description of the ancient Athenian call to assembly, where 30,000 citizens were expected to attend when a flag went up over the city at dawn, and where anyone arriving late was marked with paint. But there are many other assemblies throughout the book: voluntary associations, mutual aid societies, neighborhood groups. All of these are assemblies. It will probably not have escaped your notice that we are at this very moment in an assembly, a convocation or calling together, and so powerfully linked are assemblies with intellectual work that one dictionary definition specifies that an assembly is, quote, a regular gathering of the teachers and students at a school. The verb to assemble means not only to gather, but to create, to construct, to fabricate. What is it that is in the making at this very moment? And by fabricate, if you can think, for example, of assembling a model airplane, or you can think of the assemblage at an art exhibit like the one by Shaw Osha right now on campus for the next week. So what is it that at this moment we're constructing or creating? That's hard to define. But as a first approximation, we probably wouldn't be too far off to say that this assembly is certainly a voluntary association, since all of you chose the school freely. And probably we could also say that it's a mutual aid society, since for the next set of years, you will be assisting one another in countless ways, and in particular, in achieving the capacity for deliberation. The bonds among members of a mutual aid society, bonds of fellowship and friendship, aren't quite as portentous as, say, a wedding, but they are not entirely removed from that sphere. According to one etymological dictionary, the root of the word meeting, meet, is related to the word mate and also to the word make. The word gathering also carries us in the same direction, for gather means unite and is related to the Dutch word Gade, G-A-D-E, the word for spouse, and the German word Gatte, G-A-T-T-E, the word for husband. I said that you will be assisting one another in achieving the capacity for deliberation. I believe that Evergreen is uniquely situated for teaching deliberation because last spring I visited Eirik Steinhoff's class, and the students there were simply a tour de force both in their description of their own projects and in the rigorous and ingenious ways they challenged my book. The two key features of the Evergreen academic program, the cross-disciplinary commitment and the transcript essay, which Michael Zimmerman was just talking about, have no equivalent, as far as I know, at any other school. I myself have made unsuccessful attempts to initiate a transcript essay at Harvard, and inspired by Nancy Koppelman and Kathleen Emis, I'm going to try again when I return. The cross-disciplinary framework at Evergreen is a paradigm of learning to think deliberately, creatively, and with sensory acuity, while allowing for the changing ground and countless permutations that arrive when moving across adjacent fields. The philosopher John Locke said, "The surest way to shut down thinking, to close it down, is to only read books in one field and only speak to people in a single discipline." And yet so much of our education in the United States, at the undergraduate level, at the graduate level and beyond, insists on locking people into a single subject matter. Great thinkers in the past worked in multiple fields. We think of John Locke as a political philosopher, a major philosopher because he wrote the second treatise of government. But Locke in his own time was primarily known as a physician. In fact, he collaborated with a man named Sydenham, who is often described as the father of English medicine. Locke was also a serious botanist, a passionate collector of wildflowers. So too, Thomas Hobbes. He, like Locke, is known to us as a political philosopher and a social contract thinker. But he also translated Homer's Iliad and Odyssey from Greek into English. Imagine what he had to know about language, metaphor, and meter to translate those thousands upon thousands of lines. Cross-disciplinary work enables one to deliberate even when the material keeps changing. It teaches us not specific content, but ways of thinking that can be applied to all different permutations in content. We know, finally, that any sustained masterpiece, and 2 or 4 years of friendship and mutual aid surely count as a significant masterpiece, means not just the elation of friendship and learning, but being available to entailments and weights, even crushing weights, that were never anticipated when you started out. One of the loveliest accounts of such unanticipated entailments is a poem by the Irish poet Seamus Heaney. The poem is called St. Kevin and the Blackbird. In the poem, St. Kevin is praying in a cramped monastic cell in this posture. But the room is so narrow that he has to stick one arm out the window when an unforeseen event occurs. Here's the poem. And then there was St. Kevin and the Blackbird. The saint is kneeling, arms stretched out inside his cell, but the cell is narrow, so one turned-up palm is out the window, stiff as a crossbeam, when a blackbird lands and lays in it and settles down to nest. Kevin feels the warm eggs, the small breast, the tucked neat head and claws, and finding himself linked into the network of eternal life, is moved to pity. Now he must hold his hand like a branch out in the sun and rain for weeks until the young are hatched and fledged and flown. St. Kevin arrives in this poem with well-established habits. He had to have been in the habit of holding his arm out stiff as a plank for long hours at a time while praying in order to be even eligible to hold it out there for several weeks for the bird. I urge you this afternoon to hold your arm out, hopefully when no one else is looking, and see how long you can hold it there without moving or adjusting it. You can't adjust it because you've got a nest in it. I tried this, and slight discomfort started after 2 minutes. By 4 minutes, the discomfort was acute, and it spread to my shoulder and under my arm. I chose to put down my arm after 5 minutes. St. Kevin then must have been quite practiced in holding his arm out in order to carry it out on this occasion of special virtuosity. Additionally, Kevin must have been well-trained in feeling the weight of the world, allowing even the lightest objects to register. He no doubt noticed it when a snowflake or a leaf landed on his hand. He could probably feel all 6 spokes of a snowflake. Do you know what the weight of a blackbird is? It weighs between 3.5 and 4.5 ounces. The poem tells us that St. Kevin feels the temperature, the texture, and the shape of the undersurface of the bird. How long exactly did he have to hold his arm out there? The answer is roughly 6 weeks. 14 days for the blackbird to make the cup of twigs, grass, and straw that serves as the nest, 13 or 14 days for the infant birds to hatch, and another 13 or 14 days to fledge and fly. So that's 6 weeks, or 908 hours. If we calculate it in 5-minute intervals, it's 10,896 intervals. So Kevin was able to hold his arm 10,000 times as long as I did. Does it seem that I've gone too far afield here in sorting out Kevin's position? Well, I stopped midway in the poem. Right after where I stopped, Seamus Heaney instructs us to, quote, imagine being Kevin. So I've just been doing what I've been told and have been following Seamus Heaney's instructions. Now, I'll read the first half again, but this time I'll complete the poem. And then there was St. Kevin and the Blackbird. The saint is kneeling, arms stretched out inside his cell. But the cell is narrow, so one turned-up palm is out the window, stiff as a crossbeam when a blackbird lands and lays in it and settles down to nest. Kevin feels the warm eggs, the small breast, the tucked, neat head and claws, and finding himself linked into the network of eternal life, is moved to pity. Now he must hold his hand like a branch out in the sun and rain for weeks until the young are hatched and fledged and flown. And since the whole thing's imagined anyhow, imagine being Kevin. Which is he, self-forgetful or in agony all the time? From the neck on out down through his hurting forearms. Are his fingers sleeping? Does he still feel his knees? Or has the shut-eye blank of under-earth crept up through him? Is there distance in his head? Alone and mirrored clear in love's deep river, to labor and not to seek reward, he prays. A prayer his body makes entirely, for he has forgotten self, forgotten bird, and on the riverbank, forgotten the river's name. So in this poem, Kevin becomes the place where under-earth and sky converge. He's become the crossroads of under-earth and sky. One effect of beauty is a radical decentering of the self, a state of being self-forgetful, as we are told by the mid-20th century philosophers Simone Weil and Iris Murdoch, who speak about the way beauty brings about an unselfing, a radical decentering. We no longer insist on being the center of the world. The poem is a meditation, almost a kind of emergency primer on what to do if a bird lands in your hand. But it's also a meditation about what to do if a poem lands in your hand, or a biology book, or a math text, or a friend's problem. The European blackbird is known for its rich, melodious voice, so it's like a poem. I'm sure you know it's the bird to which the Beatles addressed their song, Blackbird Singing in the Dead of Night. And if you want a thrilling new rendering of that song, you can go to YouTube and see Bobby McFerrin's 2008 Blackbird with its falsettos and overtones and undertones that are a real demonstration piece of virtuosity. Remembering that the blackbird herself is a singer reminds us that its song and new life in their endless variety across the disciplines that we're called on to assist. When I came to Evergreen last spring, I was astonished by the care that faculty and students had taken with thinking in emergency. And what it indicated to me was the habitual way, the deep habits and practices in the way other books by Tolstoy or Hume or Plato or recent articles in Physics Today are treated here. Evergreen seems to have more than its share of St. Kevin's. And the goal of their work is the same as in the poem, that each of you become the crossroads of under earth and sky, and that ideas and intellectual possibilities be taken in hand and given the chance to fledge and fly. I hope many of you will work to understand the arguments of this book about mutual aid, and I hope that maybe one or even more of you will find a solution to the problem that I myself could not solve: how to wake up the United States population to the gravity of moral harm caused by the existence of our nuclear weapons and the dismantling of democracy. In the meantime, I wish you well on your Convocation Day, and will simply reiterate the Chilean toast: above you, below you, equal to you, and the Swiss salute to a future world where there will be equality of survival. Thank you.
We have. They love you.
Yeah, that's great.
We do have a little bit of time for some questions, and Elaine has graciously agreed to answer them. There are microphones circulating, so if you have a question, raise your hand. A microphone will find you. And if you could, since we are a community, why don't you introduce yourself before you ask your question?
Testing. Hello, my name is Bennett Griffin. I was...
Can you speak more loudly?
let me get a bit closer to the mic. There we are. A lot of times in your book, you mentioned the destructive power of nuclear weapons. The opening is about nuclear weapons, and then you go on to how other people react in other disasters. Nuclear weapons are powerful enough that most of society would be wiped out, so why do you focus on them as opposed to disasters that have happened and that we have resolved?
Can you hear? Okay. The acoustics of this room are very difficult. We practiced yesterday making sure we had the mic exactly right for me. Can you maybe come closer and say your question again? Because I can hear some of your words, but only some of them.
Okay.
And there's a kind of shimmer as though when you're speaking. So I'm hearing the wave of your voice without the words.
Maybe like here?
Yeah.
This will allow me to rephrase it in any case. Nuclear weapons have not been fired in quite some time. Why do you focus on them as opposed to disasters that have happened where communities have stepped in?
Okay, so I got the first part, that nuclear weapons have not been fired for some time, so why focus on that? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so these are important questions, and I answer them much more thoroughly in the new book, Thermonuclear Monarchy. But let me give you a quick answer. First, people think that our nuclear arsenal is something that's a holdover from the Cold War. So let me just give you a couple of quick facts. We have 14 Ohio-class submarines. Some of them are stationed nearby in Bangor on this coast. Each of them carries the equivalent of 4,000 Hiroshima blasts. 8 of the 14 were made after the opening of the Berlin Wall, so 32,000 Hiroshima blasts. We're now making a new fleet of nuclear submarines. The first one will be completed in 2019, and the last one in 2035. People think that we haven't come close to using these because we wrongly think of the Cuban Missile Crisis as the model. The Cuban Missile Crisis being, if the president is thinking about it, we'll know about it. But that is not the model. There have been at least 10 times when presidents have come equally close to using nuclear weapons. But unlike Congress, when their deliberations are open to the public, presidential deliberations are not open, and we only find out about it once their presidential papers are released. So here's a quick list. Eisenhower in 1954 considered dropping nuclear weapons in the Taiwan Straits crisis. Eisenhower again considered dropping nuclear weapons in the Berlin crisis in 1959. Kennedy, according to Robert McNamara, says that came 3 times within a hair's breadth of an all-out nuclear war. That's Robert McNamara speaking, not once in Cuba, but 3 times. President Johnson considered using nuclear weapons against China to prevent them from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Nixon has said that he considered using nuclear weapons 4 times, and that included Vietnam, but he said 3 times in addition to Vietnam. And I'm going to stop the list there. Why? Because presidents stopped thinking about it? No, because presidential papers from the later period have not yet been released. And when I say they're thinking about it, then I mean that they are doing more than just thinking. For example, Nixon sent 18 B-52s loaded with nuclear weapons over Russia towards Vietnam. He might have intended it as a bluff, but I hope you can appreciate that it's a very dangerous bluff. Recent research on nuclear winter shows that if not 1%, but 1/100th of 1% of the current arsenal is used today, 44 million people will die in the first hour, and 1 billion people will die in the first month. That's if 1/100th of the current arsenal. And I'm sure you know that by far the largest portion of the arsenal is owned by the United States and Russia, with the United States having the most powerful. Our media talks about nuclear weapons only when it's Iran's non-existent nuclear weapons, Iraq's non-existent nuclear weapons. North Korea has between 1 and 10. We have roughly 8,000, 2,000 of which are on alert. When I refer to those submarines, they aren't sitting in port. They are patrolling day and night. And there's one page in Thinking in Emergency where I quote one of the seamen from one of those submarines as saying, on every 90-day mission, there's only one day when we're not practicing. Practicing what? Practicing firing nuclear weapons. There's much more to say, but the sense that we don't need to address this, it's circular. Once the population has been disenfranchised from any knowledge about this, it can seem that this isn't a problem. But it's a big problem because once they're fired, we can't undo the injury. Physicians have again and again said that there's, well, for example, the Red Cross said in Vienna this last December, if even a single city is hit, even the International Red Cross does not have the facilities to begin to repair the injuries. Does that begin to?
Yes, thank you.
Yes?
Hello.
Oh.
Hello, my name is Colin. So my question is, your book, you talk about the complete abolition of nuclear weapons. My question is how feasible do you think that is? And
How what do I think it is?
how feasible do you think that is in reality?
I think the abolition of nuclear weapons is very feasible if the population comes forward and insists on it. And let me just elaborate that, because that's, again, a crucial question. Bill Joy had an article in Wired magazine in the year 2000, and it's going to seem like I'm digressing, but I'm going to get right to your point. He had an article in 2000 in Wired magazine that talked about the possibility that we might make robots so smart, build so much intelligence into them, that they would rebel against us. And as he's writing, it sounds like he's writing science fiction. And then he says, the prototype is nuclear weapons, because for sure they can eliminate us, and we've convinced ourselves that we can't eliminate them. Of course we can eliminate them. If you compare it, say, to global warming, which is, again, a crucial problem, but global warming, we need to work to stop it, but it's not self-evident how to do it. With nuclear weapons, it's self-evident how to do it. If you want to get a very concrete picture of this, you can find online an article by a man in Scotland whose last name is Ainslie, A-I-N-S-L-E-E, called Dismantling the Tridents, in which he shows that in order to dismantle the UK, the British Tridents, which are the equivalent of our Ohio-class submarines, some parts of it will take hours, that is, dismantling the triggers. Some parts of it will take days, some parts of it will take weeks, but the whole thing can be done in between 2 to 4 years. And military experts in the United States have said that's an accurate estimate. Now, the United States has a much bigger arsenal than that, so it's not a small job, but it's immensely doable. We know how to dismantle triggers. Yes, there'll be a big problem with where to store the radioactive material, but not nearly as big a problem as we've got right now with weapons existing intentionally to hurt people. So we've convinced ourselves we can't undo them. We can undo them, but it can't. Maybe Obama, before he leaves office, will do something to try and eliminate them. But it's hard to see how he can do it without the population coming forward and saying, we heard you in Prague. We heard you say we had to do this. We had to start doing this. We stand behind you. We're asking that it be done now.
One more.
Okay. Just one more question.
I think we're evolving sort of as a culture, like more people want peace, you know? And I watched a video of Nagasaki getting bombed, and I was just like, it's crazy, you know? There's got to be a different way, you know? But I agree with what you're saying about, you know, nuclear bombs and stuff. There's got to be a different way to do things. And I guess my question is, how do you stop the escalation of violence? Because it's like, this country has this, so this country wants to, you know, match them. And how do you stop it?
So is he saying, how do you stop in general? The escalation of violence in general, yeah. Well, again, a crucial question. All three questions have been crucial. And the thinking in emergency is trying to address that question. It's trying to remember that civilization exists in order to diminish injury, not to inflict injury. And we've kind of stood things on their head, not only because we find it so much more interesting in watching games and video games to contemplate injuring people than to figure out how to diminish injuring. Not only that stark somersaulting, but the fact that the way that deliberation is meant to put impediments in the way of injuring. We don't want to put impediments in the way of non-injuring. We don't want to obstruct an ambulance taking someone to the hospital. We don't want to put impediments in the way of somebody studying in the library. We don't want to put impediments in the way of somebody who's fallen in love with someone and wants to be with the person. Liberty entails not having impediments, with one exception, according to social contract theory, and that is that one exception is when you're going to injure people. Then you want impediments. And again, this is something that in Thinking in Emergency, I only begin to sketch, and in the bigger book, Thermonuclear Monarchy, I go into in great detail because the major social contract theorists, Locke and Hobbes, talk about the fact that a social contract exists to be a brake on injury, to be an impediment to injury. So, you know, in every possible sphere, we need to work on this. I mean, the cascading injuries to African Americans, not only by being beaten and killed, but by being put in prison for acts that didn't involve injuring anyone, such as possessing marijuana or something. This is a system that seems to be just standing on its head right now. I think it's just not something I can answer easily. It's something that all of us must work together to devise solutions for.
Thank you.
Elaine, you've educated us, you've invigorated us, you've done a wonderful job today, and your words, your ideas will stay with us for a great long time. Please, again, join me in thanking. Wasn't that wonderful? I'm now delighted to introduce someone who actually needs no introduction, since he introduced himself to you earlier. Dr. George Bridges, who will begin next week his tenure as president of the Evergreen State College, is an accomplished academic administrator, having served as the president of Whitman College for the past decade. He has expertise and degrees in sociology and criminology from the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Washington. He is, you'll not be surprised to hear, a passionate advocate for the liberal arts and the type of interdisciplinary education we practice at Evergreen. Please join me in welcoming George to the stage.
Well, thank you very much. And Elaine, thank you for your words, your remarks, for joining us here. Thank you for challenging us to mind the ideas of Dewey, to deliberately set up warning buoys and lighthouses where we see signs that danger, that emergencies may occur. Thank you for challenging us to think rather than being seduced not to think. My remarks today to you, our students, faculty, and staff, will be personal, and I hope will carry us into the new academic year in a manner such that you have a better understanding of who I am and how I view our work together. I will also speak briefly about our college as I am coming delightfully to know it. I'm thrilled to be here. But first, about me, my family. 6 years ago, my wife Carrie and I built a cabin in a very remote part of the Blue Mountains. Part of the range of mountains in southeastern Washington and northeastern Oregon at an elevation of nearly 4,000 feet, 10 miles into the wilderness of tall ponderosa pines, red fir, and larch. The cabin was built to be off the grid, powered by solar energy and accessible only with a stout four-wheel drive vehicle much of the year and a snowcat, a vehicle with wide tracks that can transport a few people and provisions for the winter's deep snow. When I first read your book, Elaine, this past June, I was sitting in our mountain house, knowing fully well that you would be here today. I was intrigued by your ideas and the challenges about how we as a society don't think about or even contemplate the likelihood of emergencies, disasters, threatening actions by our government or other institutions, whether they are floods, armed conflict, genocidal acts, or the horror of nuclear holocaust. And yet, just 3 weeks after having read your book, on a hot day in July, a spark from a wheat farmer's combine in Walla Walla ignited a wildfire that raced up a ridge south of our cabin and then, fueled by very strong winds from the south, began consuming 1,000 acres a day, 1,000 acres of forest. Thick brush, dry from drought, carried the fire through valleys and up steep hillsides at unbelievable speed. Trees would explode in front of our eyes as the fire advanced, completely out of control. And despite nearly 1,000 firefighters on the lines 24 hours a day and massive aircraft dropping many tons of fire retardant and water on the fire, the winds pushed the fire north in the direction of our home. And as we looked out of the cabin, the windows of the cabin, in utter disbelief, all we could see was heavy smoke. At times, the visibility was no more than 20 feet in front of us. And within just 2 days of the fire starting, the county sheriff and a friend of ours who was fighting the fire on the lines told us we had to evacuate as quickly as possible. Their message to us was startling and terribly upsetting. If the winds did not change, we would soon lose everything. Our house, our cherished belongings, all of it would be consumed by the fire, burning at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Never in my life had I seriously contemplated and planned for a fire of this sort occurring. That this crisis would even be possible. And there certainly was no cooperative or mutual aid agreement in our mountain region like that in Saskatchewan or the sheltering system in Switzerland described in Professor Scarry's book. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away, and he was far less capable than we of coping with the impending disaster. We felt and we were alone. We had not anticipated the need or desire for community. Students, today you join a community in which you are not alone. The Evergreen community is unique, supportive, and caring. We abide by a social contract that calls for mutual caring for and support of one another, respecting community members even if we disagree vehemently with their ideas, their words, or their manner of expression. And if we witness another person struggling, academically, socially, medically, at risk or in need, we do not look the other way. We give help, or we find it. That is Evergreen. It is also a community, as Michael Zimmerman said, that calls for thinking and reasoning through problems often before they arise. And students, we expect you to help us. We expect you to work with us, ask hard questions, and offer constructive suggestions. This is now your college, and I believe you can help us make it better by ensuring that it is as responsive as possible to your academic and developmental needs. You can help us anticipate and forestall problems before they arise. Carrie and I could not forestall the wildfire we faced this summer. And only because the winds driving the fire changed at the very last hour was our house and our cherished belongings within it spared. We have heeded Professor Scarry's advice and taken action to strengthen our relationships with others on the mountain and are developing mechanisms for mutual aid in anticipation of future emergencies. But students, you are the focus of our energy, our work, and our community. In an effort to anticipate the many challenges here and to gain your unique perspectives on your experience, I will establish this year the President's Student Advisory Council, a group that will meet monthly with me and some of the campus faculty and staff leaders to listen, learn, and to share ideas about Evergreen and also about our role in serving the greater Olympia community. We also want you to understand how this college, a very complex organization, works just as much as we want to learn how well the college is working for you. But as dedicated as we faculty and staff may be in engaging each of you in this process of learning and development, only you can ensure or guarantee that your experience proves successful. You must push yourself. Always ask the next question. Always take your thinking to another level. Always view issues from alternative perspectives. That is hard. We all are challenged by that demand, viewing issues from alternative perspectives. And before you leave Evergreen, we expect that each of you will recognize that the most valuable parts of any education, your education, are not the answers. The most valuable parts are the questions. Your degree from Evergreen State College will acknowledge the habits of mind you will have developed, the honing of your ability to ask questions, to find tension and ambiguity in issues and embrace them, and also you will have the ability to propose innovative solutions. One other thing, your degree will also acknowledge your strengths in communication, writing and speaking, in articulating ideas and presenting solutions to problems. Together, these will acknowledge your capacity to work collaboratively with others, and in many cases, to lead those collaborations. You will become leaders. Finally, we expect that as an alumnus or alumna, you will return to our campus, rekindle relationships that you developed here, and encourage and support those who come after you. This will always be your academic home. You are embarking on a really exciting and a remarkable educational experience. I welcome you to the work ahead. It will be fun, it will be demanding, it will be exciting. It is, as a colleague once stated, work on the riddle of solving yourself, who you are, and that for which you stand. So I extend my best wishes to each of you and my sincere hope that you experience no wildfires in the year ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce a member of the faculty, Marla Elliott, who will lead us, me too, in learning Evergreen's alma mater and fight song. This is cool, stick to it.
Good morning. Last thing we have to do this morning is learn the school songs, right? We have 2 school songs, the alma mater, which is a hymn to the school. You sing it to express devotion, affection, gratitude, honor to the school itself. The other one, the fight song, is addressed to your fellow members of the Evergreen community, and you sing it to inspire them to ever greater heights of achievement, athletic or otherwise. Okay. So we've been sitting for a long time, so let's get ready to sing. Let's warm up a little bit. Stand up and stretch and yawn. Okay, and when I say yawn, you need to make a noise when you yawn, because we're getting ready to use our voices, right? And that was a really polite yawn. It needs to be a really not polite yawn. Great big yawn. Okay, you'll notice that the noise that you make when you yawn is a descending siren, right? You go, oh, right? So we're gonna do one more yawn. I'm going to move over just a minute. One more yawn, and start that descending yawn siren. Start at a little higher than you normally would and slide really slowly down lower than you normally would, okay? Okay, 1, 2, 3. And stretch while you do it. Open your mouth really wide. Okay, now do that same siren, only this time you're going to slide from low to high. Open your mouth really wide and yawn and stretch. Here we go. There we go. There's a little warm-up. You can sit down now if you want. Okay, behind me, you see the lyrics to the alma mater. It's all in Latin. Don't worry about it. But we are going to take a minute to translate it and learn what the words are. So the first phrase is omnia extares. Say omnia, extares. So that last vowel is halfway between an e and an a, right? Res. Extares. Okay, and now what does this mean? Usually translated as let it all hang out. Thank you. It is the college's Latin motto. It's one of the great pieces of founding whimsy for this college. Let it all hang out is a great way to translate it. You could also think of omnia, all, everything, everybody. Extares, extend, reach out. Right? So you could also think of it as everybody reach out in every direction with everything you've got, which is a great Evergreen sentiment, right? Yay! One more Latin phrase. Alma mater. Alma means what? Soul. Mater means mother. So alma mater means soul mother. Your school is the mother of your soul. Okay? And so those are all the words, right? So here we go. Let's see. That's pretty good. Okay. Oh, here's the starting note. So it goes like that. Remember, you can't sing and learn the song at the same time. You have to listen first and then sing back. Omnia extares. Here we go. Omnia extares. Is that too low or is that okay? And then we go up a little bit and sing the same phrase again. Omnia extares. Omnia extares. And then we go up a little more and stair step down. Alma mater evergreen. And then we sing the first phrase again. Omnia extares. So is that still that pretty good pitch for people? Not too terribly low? Okay, so let's sing the whole thing together. You ready? 1, 2, ready, go. Omnia extares. Omnia extares. Alma mater evergreen. Omnia extares. That's great. Now we're going to sing it as a round. Okay, all the people who are not sitting at a table on this half of the room, you are section 1. All the people to their, who are from the tables all the way back to the bleachers over here, you're section 2, right? So all you chair people, you're section 2. Chair people and back to the bleachers here, you're section 3. All the chair people not at tables over here, you're section 4. Got it? I'll cue you in. So one of the things you'll notice is you have to keep singing that last phrase when you sing it again. When I do this, that means you just keep singing the last phrase over and over and over till we're all singing it together. Is that our starting pitch? Here we go. Ready, section 1. Are you on it, section 1? 1, 2, ready, go. Section 2, Omnia. Sing it like you love your school. Omnia extares. Section 4. Omnia extares. Omnia extares. Section 2. Omnia extares. Section 3. Omnia extares. Omnia extares. Omnia extares. Omnia extares. Omnia extares. Yay! Okay, moving on to the Gooey Duck Fight song. Can we get those lyrics on the screen, please? So we're going to learn this line by line. Let's start. This is all in English, yay. Go, gooey ducks, go. Sing that back. Go, gooey ducks, go. We're learning this really slowly, and we'll take it up to tempo after we learn it. Through the mud and the sand, let's go. Through the mud and the sand, let's go. Siphon high, squirt it out. Siphon high, squirt it out. Swivel all about. Swivel all about. Let it all hang out. Let it all hang out. So that's the first half, and the second half is extremely similar, except there's a lyric difference in the second line. So we sing, go, gooey ducks, go. Stretch your necks when the tide is low. Sing that back. Stretch your necks when the tide is low. And again we sing, siphon high, squirt it out, swivel all about. and then we stretch out and go up on the last phrase. Let it all hang out. Good? Okay. So let's sing that all together, but let's put that all together and still a little slowly. Here you go. Go, gooey ducks, go. 1, 2, ready, sing. Go, gooey ducks, go. Through the mud and the sand, let's go. Siphon high, squirt it out, swivel all about. Let it all hang out. Go, gooey ducks, go. Stretch your necks when the tide is low. Siphon high, squirt it out, swivel all about. Let it all hang out. Good. Okay, now. If you're going to sing this song with the proper spirit, you need to pretend that you are the chorus of Mounties from the Monty Python Transvestite Lumberjack sketch. Do the young people still understand that as a cultural reference? Okay, good. I'm glad to see you pay attention to the classics. Okay, so you need to do that kind of hyper-masculine bonhomie to sing this with the proper spirit. So stand up and put your imaginary Mountie hat on. And it's gonna go faster. You ready to sing faster? Okay. There's your starting note. Oh, 1, 2, ready, go. Go, gooey ducks, go. Through the mud and the sand, let's go. Siphon high, squirt it out, swivel all about. Let it all hang out. Go, gooey ducks, go. Stretch your necks when the tide is low. Siphon high, squirt it out, swivel all about. Let it all hang out. Let it all hang out. Well done. Congratulations.
Now that's a hard act to follow. Marl Elliott, one more time. And one more time for the new Evergreen community who can sing together so very well. For you. Okay, before I bring this convocation to a close, I have 2 announcements and 1 lesson for you. Do the lesson first. When you're in front of a large group of people speaking and you make a mistake, you need to acknowledge it, and you need to do it as quickly as you can. I screwed up. I forgot to announce 2 people. They deserve the same praise you gave others before. There are 2 other members of the Board of Trustees with us today. Dave Nicandri from Tumwater. And Jim Wigfall from Seattle. Okay, 2 announcements. First, students, the session entitled Your Education and Your Academic Statement is starting at 1 o'clock. You should have received on Friday an email telling you where to go and who is leading it. It is at 1 o'clock. If you have any concerns, any doubts, if you didn't get that email or if you're confused, there are people with lists at the door stop by and make sure you find out where you need to be at 1 o'clock. When you go there at 1 o'clock, if you could, bring a writing utensil and some paper, because there'll be some activities that you need to write and think about. So bring some thinking material as well. Similarly, at that event, you will learn where you need to go and when you need to go to the other required sessions. We've broken those sessions into smaller groups instead of doing it all like this. That will be handed to you in your sessions at 1 o'clock. Second announcement. Elaine has graciously agreed to stay for the next 3 hours signing books. Maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes. There's a table in the back left corner, my left, your right. When we end, if you get in line over there, she's thrilled to sign copies of Thinking in an Emergency. With that, welcome to the beginning of the 2015-16 academic year, and I declare this conversation closed.